Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has consistently polled above 10% throughout this election cycle, taking more and more votes away from President Biden. As a result, we can no longer ignore his campaign, and in this video, we're going to fill in the 2024 electoral map based on the latest three-way polling averages that take into account RFK Jr.'s support and see what impact he will have on the race to 270. We're going to start off with the West Coast and then move our way east into the Midwest, the Northeast, and then finally into the Deep South. So starting off with the state of Washington, a state Biden won by 20%. According to the latest three-way poll, Joe Biden only leads by 12 percentage points, which means that it is barely going to be a solid state. We can see here Kennedy is polling in at 9%, taking a lot of votes away from President Biden. And so the threshold for a solid state is anything over 12%. Between 5 to 12 is likely. Between 1 to 5 will be lean, and anything less than 1% is going to be categorized as being tilt. Moving down south to Oregon, 8 electoral votes, Joe Biden won this state by 16 points. He's currently ahead by 15. There are no polls that currently show the support of RFK Jr. However, I would imagine that he would take more votes away from Biden than he would from Trump. So Oregon is going to be solid for Biden as well, but a state where Biden has seen an alarming drop in support over the last 4 years is California, the largest state in the country, a state that Biden won by 30% in 2020. Fast forward 4 years now, and Joe Biden doesn't even lead by 20% according to any of the three polls that factor in support for third-party candidates. As you can see, a poll released by UC Berkeley just last month shows Biden at 40% and only ahead of Trump by 12, with RFK Jr. in the double-digit range. So Joe Biden has seen a significant drop in popularity in the Golden State, and so California is still going to be solid. Biden leads on average by 16 points, but it's only going to be half the margin that he won by in the last election. Moving on to Nevada and Arizona, our first two battleground states, which isn't really the greatest name for them at this point because they don't seem like battleground states, because Trump is leading by an extraordinary margin in both of these states. These are two states that Biden won in the last election. Nevada by 2.4%, a state Republicans have not won since 2004. In Arizona, this is a Democratic flip from 2020. Biden won the state by 0.3 of a percentage point, a state the Democrats hadn't won before this since 1996. So it was a pretty big flip in favor of the incumbent president 4 years ago, but fast forward now to 2024, he seems to have no chance at winning either of these two Sunbelt states. According to the latest polling from Nevada, this is the five-way race, including Kennedy, West, and Stein, we see that Donald Trump leads by 6.4%. Biden isn't even at 40% support, and RFK Jr. is polling at 9.7%. And so this will make the state of Nevada likely for Republicans. That would be a huge margin, even larger than Bush's victory here from 20 years ago. In Arizona, 11 electoral votes. This is a state that Biden can afford to lose, but if he loses other states up here in the Midwest, then he really has no pathway to re-election. But for right now, losing Arizona would not be good, but it would still give him at least a slim chance at winning 270, even without these two states. So in Arizona, Donald Trump leads by 7%. RFK Jr. is polling at 8.7%, very close to 10%. And you can see the impact that these third-party candidates are having. You would have to go back to the 90s with Ross Perot to see the last time where an independent candidate that wasn't a part of either the Democrats or the Republicans really made an impact. So in Arizona, the state is going to be likely for Trump as well. Before we continue, only 5% of you guys are subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe and help us reach 100,000 subscribers. When it comes to these states in the center of the country, the states that contain the Rocky Mountains and the Great Plains here in the center of the country, they're all going to be solid for Donald Trump. There's no doubt about that. We do not have many polls here at all, and there are no polls that contain Kennedy, and so Trump is going to win these states no matter what. I mean, this is where Trump's base really is, and they're going to give him quite a boost in his electoral count. He is also favored to win the 2nd district by a lean margin. We don't have polling there, but he was able to win the district in 2016. In Colorado and New Mexico, we also don't have polls that contain Kennedy. However, Biden is only slightly ahead in Colorado by a margin of 6.5%. This is less than half of his margin from 2020, while in New Mexico, Biden leads by around the same margin there, 8% on average, according to the 3 polls that we have. However, these polls really are very old. This poll right here, conducted by Public Policy Polling, was conducted in August of 2023, while these 2 Emerson College polls were from all the way back in 2022 when they were polling for the midterm. So we don't really have any updated data from these 2 states, but if RFK Jr. is taking in 10 percentage points, he will take a lot of votes away from President Biden that could make Colorado and New Mexico both competitive. But for right now, both of these states are just barely going to be likely for the incumbent president. Moving on to Texas, Kennedy's influence here can really be felt. According to the latest poll, he's polling in at 13%. Donald Trump actually only leads by 4%, according to the latest University of Texas poll. If you look at some earlier polls, though, Trump does have a much more commanding lead, with Kennedy polling at just 6%. But no matter what, he is making quite the impact here, making Texas only a likely state. According to the latest polling, Trump leads by 7.3%. Texas will be likely Republican, although that is still a larger margin than Trump's 5-point margin from back in 2020. In Alaska, Trump is leading by 8%, according to the only poll we've had so far that factors in Kennedy's support. Alaska is a state that typically does like independent candidates, and if we see this reflected in the polling, with Kennedy polling at 17%, according to a poll from October of last year. And so this means that the state of Alaska is also going to be likely Republican. Hawaii, we don't have polling from the state, but it's probably going to be solid for Joe Biden, although I could see Kennedy actually gaining quite a few votes after Biden's disastrous handling of the Maui fires. Now moving up to the Midwest, in Minnesota, Donald Trump is only behind by 3%, according to the latest polling. RFK Jr.'s impact has not been factored in here, but he is generally taking more votes away from Biden than Trump, and with the state being so close, Trump could actually win Minnesota with the help of Kennedy. And if we looked at the 2016 electoral map, Donald Trump came within 2 points of actually winning the state, a state that hasn't voted Republican since 1972. So Minnesota is going to be lean Democrat, but when we get more polling that includes RFK Jr., we might see Donald Trump actually in the lead. In Iowa, the state is so close to being solid for Trump, he leads on average by 11.5%. We do not have any polling that contains Kennedy here, but it's going to be nearly a solid victory for Donald Trump according to the numbers. While in Wisconsin, RFK Jr. is actually giving Trump quite a boost. Donald Trump leads by 4% in the 5-way polling between Biden, Trump, Kennedy, and other third-party candidates. Biden's at 37, not even at 40% in a state that he won last time. If you look at 2020, Biden won Wisconsin by 0.6%. Trump actually won the state by a larger margin back in 2016. If any Rust Belt state is going to flip first, it is going to be Wisconsin. Over the last few years, it has proven itself to be the most conservative out of the 4 states that make up the blue wall. And according to the latest polling, Wisconsin is going to be lean Republican, very close to being likely. And in Illinois, 19 electoral votes. We do not have polling that contains Kennedy, but Biden isn't polling too well. He's polling at around 10, 11 points on average, not at a 12-point average. And so that means that Illinois is going to be likely Democrat, despite voting for Biden by 17 points 4 years ago. In Michigan, this is a state that Biden cannot lose, And out of the 3 states in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, these 3 states that Trump flipped in 2016, Michigan is the most liberal, Wisconsin the most conservative. Michigan voted for Biden by 3 points in 2020, but look at the polling now. Trump leads by 3.5 percentage points in a 5-way race. Kennedy's at nearly 10 points once again. Biden isn't even over 40 once again, and so that will make Michigan lean Republican as well, just like its neighbor in Wisconsin. While in Indiana, we don't have any polls that include Kennedy, but Trump leads by a very healthy 20-point margin. Mike Pence is not going to be on the ballot with Trump anymore. He did not endorse Donald Trump, but that really is not going to matter. Trump is going to destroy Biden and Kennedy in the state of Indiana. While in Ohio, we do actually have quite a bit of polling that includes RFK Jr. As we can see here, Trump plus 11, plus 12, plus 9, and plus 14. This is a state that he won by 8% in the last election. Kennedy even polled in at 13% in just earlier this month. And if we look at the average here, Trump plus 11.5, same margin as Iowa. It is barely going to be likely Republican. And finally, to finish off the Midwest, we have the keystone state of Pennsylvania. This was the state that got Joe Biden over 270 electoral votes in 2020, one of the most important states electorally, and actually the birth state of Joe Biden. However, his home state isn't really giving him much love, as we see here. According to the 5-way polling average, Donald Trump leads by 2.7% against Biden. And right now, if we look at the Midwest here, Pennsylvania is probably doing the best for Biden out of the 3 upper Midwestern states here. Michigan, Wisconsin, polling has consistently favored Trump over the last few months. But in Pennsylvania, there have been some polls where Biden has done slightly better, but Trump still leads in most of them, and that gives him a 2.7% margin, which means that Pennsylvania will be lean Republican as well. I mean, just look at all the red here. Nearly the entire Midwest is red. Minnesota barely holding on there for Biden. Illinois isn't even solid blue anymore, but if you look at the Midwest, just even in 2012, it was basically all blue. Go back to 2008, the entire Midwestern region went blue for Barack Obama, but now it is one of the most split regions in the country after Trump flipped many of these states back in 2016. And going to 2024, it seems that he's going to hold on to them despite losses in 2020. Moving up to the Northeast, this is a region where RFK should do slightly better. This is where he is from. Of course, the Kennedy family is still based in Massachusetts. They've had many people representing the state in Congress and in other high-level positions. But starting off with New York, 28 electoral votes. Of course, Biden is still the favorite, but things are starting to tighten up. If you look at the polling, Biden struggled to lead by a double-digit margin in 3 polls in a row. Kennedy even polled in at 18%, according to Siena College. If you look at the latest poll, though, Kennedy at 13%, Biden's lead is 10%. But really, this is absolutely abysmal. Democrats have taken a significant loss in support from the Empire State over the last few years. In 2020, Biden won the state by 23 points. That margin is now less than 10%, and a big reason for this is what happened with Andrew Cuomo. We saw in 2022, Republicans picked up many House seats in New York, and the governor election was very close. Kathy Hochul only won by a single-digit margin. So New York is not going to be solid. It's only going to be likely Democrat. In Vermont, we don't have polls that include Kennedy. Same thing with Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. All of these regions are very solid for Democrats, and Joe Biden is probably going to win them. In Massachusetts, though, this is the home state of RFK Jr. and, of course, all of the other Kennedys. He is polling at double digits on average. A poll from October actually showed Kennedy at 17%. Biden leads by 20 points, although if you compare this to 2020, once again, it's not a good margin. He won the state by 34% last time. So Massachusetts, going to be solid blue, but I think RFK Jr. is going to do better in this state than many other states across the country. In New Hampshire, we have some pretty surprising results. Donald Trump does significantly better if RFK is on the ballot. According to the latest poll, Biden only leads Trump by 3%, Kennedy at 12%. Kennedy can make a difference here in New Hampshire, a state just like Alaska that does tend to like voting for independents. So New Hampshire is just barely going to be likely Democrat, with Joe Biden leading on average by 5%. And finally, up north in Maine, this is a state that's caused a lot of stir because of the two latest polls that have been released. RFK is not in any of them. However, Donald Trump actually leads in Maine, a state that Republicans have not won going all the way back to the 1980s, with 1988 being the last time that any Republican had won in Maine. George W. Bush never won the state. And of course, in 2020, Trump didn't really come too close. But if you look at the most recent poll from the state, Trump leads by 6%. He's up 20% in the 2nd district, while in the other poll released from all the way back in November, Trump leads by 14 in the 2nd district and is only behind by 1%, according to the poll from the at-large vote. So if we fill in Maine, it's going to be likely for Biden in the 1st district, solid for Trump in the 2nd district, and the at-large vote is going to be lean for Donald Trump. And so this will finish off the entire Northeast. And now to finish off the map with the Deep South, Virginia is going to be likely Democrat. The latest polling with RFK has Biden ahead by just 6%. Kennedy is pulling in the double-digit range, while the rest of the Deep South is going to be entirely red, especially these states here like Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, South Carolina as well. While in North Carolina and Georgia, we have races that should be competitive, especially considering their 2020 margins. But in 2024, Donald Trump has taken a 7.7% lead in the three-way race in the state, at the Tar Heel state. Only 6% of the vote is currently going to Kennedy, and so that will make North Carolina likely for Trump. Georgia, we have the same thing, a state that Biden actually won last time. Trump leads by 7.4%. Kennedy's presence isn't really felt here. I don't feel that Kennedy is going to do too well in the South. I think mainly the West Coast, as well as some of the Midwest and the Northeast, is really where he's going to perform best. Georgia will be likely Republican, and so will Florida, where the latest polling has Trump ahead by double digits, although not over 12%. Kennedy is polling relatively well in the double-digit range here as well, but overall, it is going to be a pretty solid victory for Donald Trump in a state that was supposed to be very, very competitive back in 2020. And so this is the 2024 electoral map based on the latest polling averages, with the consideration for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. supporters. And so this gives Trump 315 electoral votes, Joe Biden at 223. And at this point, it does not seem that Kennedy is going to win any electoral votes. But if he continues to gain ground over the next few months, he really could be a presidential contender and could even feature in some of the debates. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and like this video down below if you enjoyed it.